Hey guys and girls, Board now back with you for another edition of what we've been watching this month thingy. And this month's guest is horror podcaster Chauncey K. Robinson. Welcome to
Hi.
the show. Hello.
Thanks for having me. Hello,
So,
everyone.
so a newbie to the channel, and you guys know the drill by now. Basically, me and the guest for the month run through what we've been watching in the world of film and TV for the last month. We hopefully give you some recommendations and say what we think of them, and also we might say where they're streaming or where you can find them. So we'll see, and you guys can let us know what you've been watching in the comments also. So yeah, we're going to make a start. So Chauncey, if you want to talk about your first film.
Well, what I saw earlier this month, finally, I got around to being able to see it, was Late Night with the Devil. I really enjoyed it. It's a film that I felt I love the old classics, like the ones that play on the classic, as opposed to movies that are all like technology based and everyone's on a cell phone, because this one takes place in like the 1960s or 70s or whatnot. And I thought it had some genuine scares. It doesn't, overstay its welcome. It's like an hour and a half. And I thought it had some really good, it was a good spooky story. Like, it didn't overstay its welcome. I could see it being like a short story in a book too. And I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought it was really good.
Okay, well, I can jump in on this one actually, because that's one of the ones I've seen this month as well. Yeah. So yeah, it recreates the feel of 1970s talk show. This quite eccentric host that is chasing the big ratings, trying to compete with Johnny Carson. So he hosts a Halloween special and gets some like supernatural themed guests on, and things go from there. So this is on Shudder now. Yeah, I'd heard a lot of hype for this. I was a bit disappointed, to be honest.
Okay.
I think just because I found the gimmick quite distracting. Like, I thought it was a good gimmick, but I was always distracted by it. It is a gimmick type thing. And I thought it was very well done. Like, they definitely got the 70s look, and it felt like one of those Letterman style talk shows. The lead guy was very good as well.
Yes, he's been in so many different things. He was in Oppenheimer too. Like, he's a really great actor. I'm glad he's getting more parts.
Yeah. So I think it was that, and I think also the horror moments felt a bit flat to me. I think I'm guessing because it was low budget, but I didn't think the effects were very good. And it might be that thing of, because it was one kind of film for quite a while, then those sorts of moments kind of take you out of it a little bit.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say watch it to people. Like, I wouldn't say don't watch it. And I think this is just a personal taste on my part. Like, it's not that I'm saying it's a bad film or anything. I like the idea of the film and what it's doing. And I think it's also funny that one of my takeaways is that because it's in the 70s, it kind of goes to the well of what we've seen a lot of horror movies doing before. And that's just because of the setting and the timing, but like that was another thing I had with it. But definitely a solid movie. I would definitely recommend people see it. It's quite easy to see with it being on Shudder now. So yeah.
I think one of the things with it was, I think its strongest parts was the acting. And I think the other strongest part was when they did practical effects. I'm a practical effects advocate when it comes to horror movies. I think CGI and all that other stuff just doesn't ring as true when it comes to horror, because horror can be so visceral, and sometimes you don't even need the gore. So when you do have gore, you want it to keep you in the atmosphere, and CGI can always take you out. So I love there were some elements where they had there's one scene that's really great practical effects, and I won't like spoil it, but I thought that scene was really good. But when it came to some of the CGI, certain moments that were CGI, and it was just so obvious, like you said, like a low budget, it was so obvious that it was computerized, that definitely takes you out. And I think the film does well to kind of set you into the atmosphere of behind the scenes of a late night show. So I think those of us who have studied theater or anything like that, when everything's going on in the background and you're like, what's happening? You will definitely find that relatable. And then on top of that, perhaps demonic possession too thrown into the mix. So
yeah, one thing I did like was the kind of cutaways during commercial breaks and how that was filmed in black and white, but it really got across this sense of them trying to hold the whole thing together type thing, you know.
Yeah.
Thinking on their feet and stuff.
Yeah, and I think also there was the element where I know there was a little controversy around it because I think some of the images were AI. Like in the beginning, which I actually thought, which was funny because I was like, oh, this is a great kind of opening to kind of set you into it, like it's telling an old school story. But I guess it wasn't, I guess it was AI rendered. And I'm not one of those people who are like, AI has to go away, we can't use it at all. I just think, you know, it should be in respect to labor and stuff, but it's also kind of like, we can't stop progress in that regard. And for me, having watched it and not knowing that there was like some AI thing, I was like, well, I don't see why that would be like, this is like a low budget film. They might not have had the budget to like go with some, but so we got this and it was solid. So I think there was controversy around that, but hopefully people don't hold that against it too much, because I really do think, I think the reason why they might is just because they might not want to admit that sometimes, you know, AI works when it comes to artistic stuff. And that's such a point of contention right now in the industry of filmmaking and TV and stuff. But I thought that worked. And I also, fun thing about that too, is one of the like secret societies that's like mentioned, because there's talk about secret society, not going into details for spoilers. But the funny thing is, though, that is a real thing that's located here in California where I am, which is so funny. And like, it's like, oh, is that a real, like, they don't say that's what they do, but it's actually a real place. And one of the jokes is that around here is that if you go to a certain area, like you can't get in because that's owned by these people and the stuff they do. So,
oh wow, okay.
I thought that was interesting. So they put some real history in there.
I'm with you on AI. I think there is a place for it, definitely. It's just how you use it. And I think part of it is that it's maybe just happened a bit too fast for people and they haven't had time to adjust and process it. So I think that has to be dialed back a little bit and just used here and there at first, at least. That's sort of where I am on it, I think.
No, I agree. I think it's case by case. Like, I don't think it should be abused. Like, I don't think Late Night with the Devil abuses it at all. They definitely have actors. They have everybody else. Not like the whole movie was AI. And it was like one guy and everyone else was digitally altered or something. But I also think, you know, it just shows, like, as much as we love film and things like that, it's always, you know, been an industry where people have been fighting for, you know, to be able to make a living doing this kind of work. So I can see how, you know, when some people feel like they barely are being able to keep their health care and stuff, in the US in particular, I should say, you know, because they have to make a certain amount in order to, you know, qualify or whatever like that, knowing that, you know, the writer's room can go from like 14 to 7 because the company is like, well, those 7 people can use AI tools, so we don't need all 14 of you to check and recheck. I get that. I get how that can be like disappointing. At the same time, though, I'm like, but this is the evolution of things. Like, I mean, I mean, the Industrial Revolution over here, I mean, it was a thing where people were doing stuff by hand and then suddenly there were machines. You can't say, let's not,
can't really stop
it. You know, you can't stop it. If it's the more efficient thing to do, they're going to do it. I think it just has to be in relation to not abusing it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it sort of has to work for everybody
yeah.
at the end. A film called Rolling Thunder from the 70s.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
know if you've not heard of this one. Okay.
Mm-mm.
So it's about a war veteran who comes back from war. He's played by William Dufresne, and he returns with his life sort of up and down because his family assumed he was dead at one point, and his wife has started seeing another guy at the time, so that makes it very awkward. And it's about his experience coming back from war, and it kind of has this surreal sort of feel to it where it gets inside his head, and he's very aloof for a lot of the opening part of the movie. But then I don't know how much I can give away, but basically it turns into a revenge film because something dark happens about halfway through it. Yeah, that sort of movie.
Well, not a coming of age tale.
No, it doesn't turn into 70s. It's very sort of gritty and nihilistic, and it becomes a revenge movie. It's also got a young Tommy Lee Jones in, quite an early role for him, and I quite liked it. I hadn't heard of it before. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I saw it mentioned in the write-up that Tarantino was a big fan, and I think you can see why when you watch the film, because like some of the action scenes are quite pulpy, and also it does have like quite an edgy sort of vibe. And it was good. Like it went in a couple of different directions, which I didn't really see coming. I think it's maybe typical of the time, the film, because now I think we're so used to like these revenge films, and there's been a lot of them. So I think you can get a little bit bored with them. But I guess for the time, it was still quite fresh, and I think it drags a little bit towards the end, but the ending is very strong. It's a very masculine film. I mean, it's definitely in that sort of era and is very much from a masculine perspective. But it's I would recommend checking it out if you're into that kind of film. Like, not perfect, but definitely worth a look. So that's Rolling Thunder, it's an MGM film, so it was on their streaming service.
Oh, okay.
So that's where I watched it.
I rewatched this one. I saw it in the theater for advanced screening, and then I watched it again. And that's Sting, the movie with the spider. It's one of the two spider movies that's come out thus far. I think it's the better one. I know a lot of people are talking about Infested, but it kind of goes back to my thing where I don't care for a whole bunch of CGI, even if it's CGI spiders. And I think Infested kind of leans on that too much. And I felt like Sting, which is by an Australian filmmaker, I thought it had a lot of heart to it, but also good scares when it comes to spiders, when it comes to building atmosphere. It kind of reminded me of Jaws in a way, because it didn't rely so much on seeing the spider all the time, but also, I mean, it wasn't like you didn't see the spider. Like, the spider was there and it was worth it. And there were some practical effects used too. So you're not going to be like, oh, that's all computer and it feels so fake. But it really felt like, okay, that's a spider. And I felt like that added to, I don't always watch creature features, particularly with bugs, because I get itchy as I watch them. So I usually like avoid bug creature features, but this one I wanted to check it out. And so I thought this one was really good. It was higher in terms of expectations than I thought I was going to get out of it, because I think what it was that it didn't lean on, this is a spider film. It leaned on the characters. It leaned on the acting. It leaned on the story, because it all takes place in a small, kind of dilapidated housing complex. So that in itself kind of during a snowstorm. So it kind of creates this whole kind of haunted kind of vibe too. And I thought it was just really good overall. Had a lot of great beats. And overall, I would highly recommend it. Even if you're afraid of spiders, I think, like I said, with the Jaws aspect, where the spider aspect is not always prominent because it does something. Jaws is one of my favorite films. And one of the things I love about Jaws is that it creates atmosphere. Like you see the aftermath of the shark sometimes, or the anticipation of a shark. And I really think that the filmmaker leaned into that when it came to Sting as well. So I would highly recommend Sting.
Oh, excellent. That's a strong thumbs up then. And my regular co-host is based in Australia, so I'll mention to her then it's an Australian director. But yeah, it sort of sounds like a bit of a bottle movie along with a creature feature. So that's kind of a cool combination because I do like bottle movies as well.
Yeah, I thought, it was just, I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was, and not because like I doubted the filmmaker or anything, because I didn't really know much about the filmmaker. It was just more so, I feel at times creature features sometimes really lean on there's a creature, and that's what it is. If you like creature features, it's about the creature. But when they can add actual, I mean, that's why Jaws is such a classic, right? Like it could have been something just about a shark that's like killing people, but they made it on the sheriff, and they focused on the town and their need for tourism. And there were just so many powerful moments that had nothing to do with the shark being on screen. And I think Sting definitely leans onto that. And you don't always see that with these kind of films.
Yeah, it does seem to be a little bit of a dying art at times. So it's good to see it when it is done well. So yeah. We're still waiting for that in the UK. So I think it's soon because I keep seeing the poster for it. So
great.
Cool. Okay, so my next film is a Korean film called Save the Green Planet. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Okay. So I go to a monthly film club and they get people to pick movies. And this was one of my choices. And the theme is kind of like sort of like underappreciated gems type thing. So this is it's sort of movie that the least you know going in, the better. But the setup is then you've got this guy who is really paranoid, and he is convinced that aliens from a planet, Andromeda, are among us and are about to destroy the Earth. So there's a little bit of an environmental theme in it, and he kidnaps a businessman who works at the chemical plant who he believes is involved. So you get a lot of conspiracy theory type vibes. And that becomes the tension of the film, that he's got him kidnapped, he's got him held up. And the more he feels this guy is lying to him, the more he tortures him. So, and he's also got a girlfriend. They have a bit of a kind of a colorful like relationship, and like in many ways you can see how it's like an Asian movie because it's very extreme at times, like sort of scenes of torture, and which I think is justified partly because there is a point behind it, but it's very stylized. It's very sort of, I guess, psychedelic at times, like the visuals and stuff, and it plays into, you do get heightened bits where it's quite sort of pulpy and hammy sort of action scenes. And then you get scenes that are a lot more condensed to like this one room. But yeah, it's sort of mixed in sci-fi with like conspiracy theory, like thriller and like black comedy. So it's a real mix. Like it's a mix of stuff, and it either works for you or it doesn't. Like, and it really does work for me. Like the way it all comes together, because there's bits where you do laugh out loud, and then I think you're right. Well, was that meant to be funny? That kind of thing. And then there's bits where you're just going with the action. But it's an interesting film because it came out in 2003. And I think at that point the internet was still in its like infancy, and I think that's partly what the film made me think is a lot of the development of like conspiracy theories on the internet. And it's really smart, I think, then the film plays itself so close, like where it doesn't reveal till very late on if his like paranoia is like true. But I think the point is he's not justified in his reactions, even if it is true. Like,
Yeah.
but it's one of these sort of cult gems. I know the director of Poor Things is doing a remake.
Oh, okay.
So we'll see how that goes. I mean, I love the original so much. I don't think it really needs a remake. I think it's a really unique film. And if you're into kind of like a certain brand of Asian cinema, like, you know, a certain extreme brand, but with like black humor. And actually, I did quite get into the relationship between him and the girl, even though I thought for her own sake, she's probably better off without this guy because he's absolutely terrifying. But I did actually get into their relationship weirdly. So, yeah, Save the Green Planet. I really like it. It's sort of up my street. Not for everyone, definitely. Very niche. But yeah.
So it had like extreme like torture stuff in it?
Yeah, it does go pretty far. Yeah.
I cannot sit through that. Just like stuff like I didn't like Hostel when it came out because I was like, oh my gosh, people are just getting. I did sit through Saw because I thought that story was good, but like I guess if you're saying like it works with the plot line though, so it's not like just gratuitous, like it's like supposed to be there. I think that works.
Yeah, I think there's ideas behind the film, and I think it's just a fine line. There's something about Asian cinema where they just make it work. Like it's got its own unique vibe. Because, like you, I'm not really into the whole torture porn thing because to me, it's not what horror is about.
No, exactly.
You know? So, I'd recommend that one for a certain audience.
This night I hadn't seen it. It actually came out in theaters like back in January, February, was Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. It's the sequel to the previous reboot one, not the one with the women because that got a lot of backlash, so they redid it with the originals, which was a really strong. I thought that Ghostbusters was a really strong one. This one, it was solid. Yeah, this one, Frozen Empire, was solid. It's like 2 hours or so long because I feel like with each movie, they always have to put so much in there, mainly because of the nostalgia aspects they want to fit in, but then the stuff of bringing into modern things. And I don't know if I remember the originals being that long, but once again, they didn't have to kind of like give you like references to stuff you used to watch and, you know, so on and so forth. So I liked it. It was the word that comes to mind for me for the movie is cute. You know, the special effects were good for the most part. They didn't really do practical special effects. It was definitely, you know, computerized, but it wasn't meant, I feel like, to be like, it's not really meant to be scary. There are some epic feeling moments, but it's not really I want to say Ghostbusters isn't always like because I feel like the first one did have some horror elements where it was like, okay, this is a little creepy, but with the comedy because the comedians are the Ghostbusters, right? Yeah. This one felt more wholesome in that regard. I don't think it had as much of an emotional punch as the one previous to it, but I understand because of what the previous one was dealing with. So this one was a little more like, you know, there's like 2 to 3 plot lines going on, family issues. And then of course there's a big bad that wants to always focus on New York City and and like take over the world. So it's kind of like the same formula they always have. And someone's trying to, shut down the Ghostbusters. That's always one. So it's like, if you know what you're getting into and you're into the Ghostbusters franchise, then you will enjoy it. If it's kind of like it's never been your cup of tea, then you probably won't like the new one either, the latest one either. But I thought it was okay. I mean, I thought it was a bit long. Some movies I'm fine with being long. Like I will sit through The Irishman. I sat through that multiple times because that's my jam. And I've also sat through Oppenheimer multiple times. There are just some movies where I'm like, it's okay that it's almost 3 to 4 hours. Hours of the Killer Moon. Okay, that's fine. But some movies where I'm like, I don't think you needed this. I think your editor was a little too liberal for you, and this should like cut some of this out. And I did feel that with this movie a few times.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, I was a bit mixed on this one, and I definitely preferred Afterlife more. Yeah. I think because one of the things I've been talking about with like someone else on the channel is like sort of a good use of nostalgia, and I think the way they used nostalgia in Afterlife made sense, and I think it was hard not to be moved at the end scene.
Yeah, I mean, that was beautiful, really given the character and everything, and it's just like, oh, they did such a great job with Afterlife. Like I said, it was like an emotional punch. This one was lacking, but I think it's because they didn't have the same thing to lean on. So.
Yeah, and I did like the switch up in Afterlife, like it feeling more like a kid sort of Ghostbusters. I like that. And yeah, with this one, I think there were too many characters, too much going on, because I'm always up for Annie Potts appearing, and I like that they got her in the uniform, but she didn't really need to be in that scene in a way, which is a shame because she's always great. But yeah, it was what it was. It sort of passed the time. Yeah, it was fine, but I prefer Afterlife, definitely.
Yeah, it felt scattered. Like every new scene, there was like some new thing going on. I'm like, okay, we're introducing all the storylines in the first 30 minutes. Like, all right, there's a lot happening. It almost felt like, and I hate to say it, but it almost felt like it should have been like a 6-part miniseries, so they could like focus on each person. Then the 6th episode could be the culmination. That way we get an episode with all these new characters we got. I mean, they did what they could. I did hear there's going to be another sequel because, I mean, it's making money. It's a franchise. But I do wonder how much further we can go with it, you know.
Yeah, so someone I follow online said then now, because we get into the stage where every movie you do have that kind of end of the world style plot, then yeah, maybe putting it on TV in like an anthology sort of like format could actually work, because you could do different things and change it up, and I think it would work as a TV show. Maybe I went to see Civil War at the cinema. Okay. I really liked this. So Kirsten Dunst is in it. It's about war photography, a group of war photographers. So sort of set during a like fictionalized civil war in America, so tensions are really ramped up, and it partly follows them almost on their day-to-day lives, like covering these extreme events. So I think that's part of the idea of the film, and one of the things I liked about it was how it became a road movie, because you had these 4 different characters. So you had Kirsten Dunst, who's quite an experienced photographer. You've got the one who regularly works with her. And then you've got an older, like more experienced journalist who needs a ride, basically. And he's going to like another location. Like they're sort of heading to Washington for like the big kind of showdown, if you like. And then you've got a younger photographer who's learning the tricks of the trade, and like Kirsten Dunst's character takes her under her wing. But it becomes a road movie, and I think that's part of the point of the film, is that it gets across how normalized these horrific events are in that kind of profession. It's almost like this is your life and you're coasting along, and they can be laughing in the van 1 minute and banter, but then the next they have to be on their toes because their lives could be in danger, or they just have to be sharp to get the shots. And obviously they've got certain deals with people in the army or whatever when they take them around. And yeah, it's a very powerful, quite a tense movie. The way it's shot, like a lot of freeze frames and slow motion. So it's all like bits of it are almost done like kind of photography. I think the cast are very strong. Like Kirsten Dunst is like really understated performance, and I really like her vibe with the younger character because I think she sees that this character could go down the same path as her, and she's a bit worried about that. A bit worried about, is she too young for this life? Like how soon is too soon for her? Just trying to guide her, and she's developed quite a cynical sort of attitude towards the whole situation. But as I said, it's very well done, very well played. There's some good use of music. There's also some good black humor sprinkled in, which I appreciated because I think with a film with this subject matter, you need the lighter touches. Like there's lighter touches. Like at one point when they go into this town, there's just like a clothes store that's open, even though it's like the middle of the Civil War. And you've got this really casual sort of counter girl who's just there at the counter reading, and they come in and it's like, yeah, don't you know there's a Civil War? And she's like, yeah, whatever, I just stay out of it, kind of thing. Let me know if you want to try something on. So there are moments of humor, and I appreciate that in that kind of movie, but it's very character driven, and when it needs to be dark intense, it definitely is. I think my only thing was they got a bit carried away at times with some of the style, like because there was a lot of like slow motion tracking shots. I think some black and white shots, but it was like they probably did those like a couple of times, maybe too long. But it was good. I thought it was very good, very powerful, and makes you think about this sort of thing and the politics behind it as well, because Nick Offerman, who's in it, was great casting as like the president.
He's awesome.
He's amazing. Stirring stuff up.
He's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so, Civil War.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet. I've been wanting to see it, but it's really interesting because especially, man, just with the politics of things. I know, and this is why, and it's always so weird sometimes because I'll be like, as a critic here in the United States, there are people who will want to avoid certain type of movies because they think they're divisive, and then they'll tell like the people who follow them, like, don't watch this movie, we don't need movies like this right now, they're so divisive. But a lot of time it's because they're calling out certain things. That's probably why they dislike it. So I was actually very curious about the film because I was like, there's certain types of critics who are not liking this film, or certain ones who are kind of repeat offenders when it comes to certain films with certain messaging in it. So if they don't like it, I probably will like it. Yeah. So it's definitely good to hear that it's a quality film. And I know, I really have always enjoyed Kirsten Dunst. So yeah, so that's really cool.
Yeah. My co-host is a massive Dunst fan, sort of followed her all throughout her career. So
it was Nazi Town.
Okay.
And like you paused, you're like, oh, yeah. It was Nazi Town, USA, and this one dealt with basically a part of history that just was talking about how during the rise or the reign of Hitler, how you had, people in the U.S. who were either from Germany coming over there or connected to Germany, where coming out of the Great Depression and things like that, they were looking for something, and a lot of times, you had the rise of socialism, you had the rise of, more democracies with FDR doing the Great Deal and all that stuff, which was awesome. But then you had people who were also looking into fascism. And it was very interesting kind of watching the old footage, because I just love history. So it was just so interesting watching the old footage where I'd always known that one of the biggest Nazi gatherings had actually happened in New York. At like one of our like large town like stadiums and stuff. But I didn't know what it was connected to before this film, which was this idea, because for a bit, people in America were trying to boycott Germany because of what was going on with Nazis. But what ended up happening, like political relations, they wanted to stop that boycotting and embargo. So they tried to get people to set up Nazi groups. And, it's so funny because now when we say Nazi, it's like, well, most of us, when we say Nazi, it's like, whoa, Nazi, that's messed up. But back then it was just like it was just a party. It was like the Nazis, it was, it was like, sure. So what you had was they had footage of people having Nazi, what did they call it? Bun something? I think there was a word for it, like buns.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah. But it was so like weird because in the background, the person would be speaking and there would be the Nazi flag and the American flag, like right behind them. And them having camps and getaways for kids and stuff. And I was just like, this was something they did like chill, like just in American towns, like, okay. And there were people who really were like, they would name fascism. They were like, fascism is the way to go, which is such a funny thing because now we throw around the word fascism when we want to say someone's bad, right? Because that's what we usually associate it with now. But back then it was just like any other kind of road forward that people were trying to figure out. And it was just such an interesting documentary where just the footage and how it came about was interesting. Just kind of seeing the different road that each country took when it came to answering the real problems that these countries were going through, right? Like after the First War, Germany was feeling it, and then they turned to the way of the scapegoat type thing. But then, and over here in the US, we decided to do the New Deal. And that was really, powerful with Social Security and things like that. So kind of seeing these two places going through very real things, but picking very different paths to go on, but also how it connected to the influence over here because we hear about the neo-Nazis here. And a lot of time I've always just thought that's some new person who's got Hitler as their screensaver, like some new Gen Z or millennial of my generation, like, but they were back there too. Yeah. There were Nazi fanboys back in the 1950s and stuff. And I'm like, wow. Crazy. So very interesting. Very interesting. It's actually it's streaming on HBO.
HBO. Now. Okay.
Yeah. Nazi Town, USA.
Nice catchy title. One to take your family to. Well, I'm still going back to horror with my next few really, but this is a bit of a random one because I watch like horror movies on stream every Friday night. Yeah. So I watched a movie from the early 90s called There's Nothing Out There. And this was a movie kind of recommended, but last month's co-host said she'd watched it and said a few things. So I thought, okay, it's one to tick off. It's a student-made film, and then later on it got picked up by like a really low-budget studio, really small studio. So it started being made in the late 80s, but wasn't released till 91. And it's a typical, the setup is typical, group of like college kids or whatever go away for like the weekend, and there's something out in the woods, and you've got the sort of archetypes. Now, this sort of movie, because it is so low budget and it is so amateurish, I think that's where the novelty value comes in for me. Like, there's a novelty value to these movies where you watch it and think, well, yeah, I could make that actually. Like, I'm no filmmaker, but I could probably make something that's at least up to that standard, or maybe better. Like, it's that kind of thing. It's the sort of thing where at one point a character runs into a tree and you can tell that she barely touches it. That kind of thing. Like, just lots of like gaffes and mistakes and things like that. The opening title scene, which seems to go on for forever, but it's like this trippy kind of almost like Twilight Zone opening, where it's like lots of blurry colors, the camera's swerving all over the place, and it's going to be like so bad it's good. But this one wasn't. This one was a bit of a slog to get through, and because the budget was so low and they were trying to like hide the creature for as long as they did, it was one of these where you spent so much time with the characters and the characters were like just so bad and just so plain to sit through and watch, because like they just made them like kind of the same. Like they gave them certain archetypes and then it was just like, just play that the whole movie. So like the nerdy guy, who you knew was a nerd apparently because he's into horror movies and he doesn't shut up about horror movies, and that was one of my takeaways. Then the person who made this seems to be a horror fan, and yet he doesn't have a very high opinion of horror fans.
Right.
It's kind of like this guy is an outcast and he's deemed a nerd just because he rambles on about horror movies. But he was also very sarcastic, and he just took that to a ridiculous extent where he, like, literally every other line he's making a sarcastic comment. And yeah, really wooden acting. Originally there was no kind of nudie bits in the film, and the studio apparently was like, no, we need to get some nudie bits in. And it's almost like, well, they're killing time because they've got to drag out the movie. So, like, you've got a group of punks doing some skinny dipping randomly, and you never see those punks again after that scene. and the fun, yeah, they just got them in for that. And then the funny thing was, one of the characters, last half an hour, 40 minutes, is in a bikini, and she literally walks around in it all the time. So she goes out for a swim, so that's the excuse to have it on first of all. And then something happens in the house, so she comes running in, and so she's still got the bikini on. And then she's in the bikini for pretty much the rest. I'm pretty sure at some point she had the chance to go and get something on. And because there's one brief bit where the main guy puts his coat over her, but it's for like 10 minutes, and then she even gives it back, or he takes it back, and it's like they're like, well, she's been covered up for 10 minutes. I think it's time to
oh my gosh.
That's what it felt like. Now, the creature, once it's revealed, and you're talking about Ed Wood levels of like plastic creature, it actually has lasers coming from its eyes, like green lasers. So it's a lizard type thing, which is meant to be an alien, and it does mind control with these lasers. So when they whipped that out, I was okay, I'm kind of into this movie again. But then 10 minutes later, I got bored with it. So it's not great. It's not great. But it's called There's Nothing Out There, and not surprisingly, it's free on YouTube.
Of course. I wouldn't be surprised.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah. How long is it?
It's short. It's 90 minutes, but
good.
It definitely felt drawn out.
Okay. Yeah, anything longer than 90 minutes, it's just like, okay, how much more can you say with something like that? I remembered that I did finally get to sit down, as opposed to just clips. I got to finally sit down and watch the Winnie the Pooh horror film, Blood and Honey. I finally got to see it because of the whole thing about the so-called Poohverse or whatever. That movie was bad. Like, it was good. I thought it was, kind of like what you were just saying about this film, where it's like, you want something to be so bad it's good. And it tried so hard to be something. And I mean, I'm I'm not gonna rain on anyone's parade and be like, why does everything have to be a horror film? But I do kind of feel like that sometimes, especially with like characters from back in the day and stuff. Like Tinkerbell and them don't need a horror like tinge to it. You really don't. Because I did feel like this film, Blood and Honey, I thought it really relied on the Winnie the Pooh thing. And it's like, the thing is, you know, some movies, when they take a different turn, it's like, okay, they make it their own. You know, they made it a horror movie, but they really lean on the horror. Like, people don't always give it its credit, but the Leprechaun franchise was very much that, right? It was kind of like, this leprechaun is supposed to be a happy-go-lucky leprechaun, and they totally made him this horror icon. And like, the most awesome gimmicky ways with all of the franchise, when he goes to the hood twice, when he goes to space, all of that, Vegas, it worked. And I was kind of hoping that they'd do that with this, but I feel like, one, they might have taken themselves too seriously, but also one of the things was I felt that they didn't really have a plot outside of it being a play on Winnie the Pooh. And I'm always, when I watch films, I always try to take away some of the biggest element of the film. That, like, if a film seems to be leaning on something, I say to myself, if I took away that element, would this even be something people would talk about or be interested in? And I really felt like, I was like, if you take away the fact that this is based off of Winnie the Pooh, this movie would have came and gone. No one would have been paying attention. If this was just some people in the woods killing people, no one would have paid attention to this film. Like, but it's because of the fact, because it's nothing to really pay attention to, but it's because of the fact that it's the Winnie the Pooh, that's the gimmick. And that is what got eyes on it, but it's not like it actually had a good plot. So I am going to probably watch the sequel that was put out, but I am... I don't have high hopes after watching the first one. I'm just like, this is bad. So, I'm not looking forward to like the Mickey Mouse or, you know, the Tooth Fairy horror stuff. It's just silly.
It is. It is. And it's just jumping on it because they've become public domain. So it's so easy to do. A couple of monthly free tickets for a couple, like, friends. And boy, am I glad I used one of the free tickets for this one, because I went to see the new Strangers film.
Oh, yeah.
Strangers Chapter 1. So Rennie Harlan making his comeback after years and actually doing a trilogy, which is crazy. We'll see how that goes. But I'd heard a lot of things over the weekend that it was really bad, because I was curious, because it's Rennie Harlan and because they're doing a trilogy. So I was sort of curious, but lukewarm going in. And it is very bad. It's probably not as bad as some of the reactions suggest, but it definitely is bad. I think it's a shame because Madeline Peach is very good. I really like her in Riverdale, and she's not really given a lot to do in this. I think in some ways it's the typical damsel type role, and she kind of does a lot of crying, and she's not really... And I think because Rennie Harlan comes from like an 80s, 90s action type background, this has that feel where he just treats it almost as a horror movie. Like an action movie. And the dialogue feels like that at times. Like, you get some cheesy dialogue. I think the lead guy who's with her, like the husband, he talks a lot like that. Like, you sort of get just a little bit of like overly cheesy, like action style dialogue. It started off not too bad because there was a few decent gags in the beginning and like the way they introduced them coming into this town. But I was taken out of the movie pretty fast because like just the way they were talking and interacting with people in this town, I thought, yeah, this just feels like a script writer working this in. And it couldn't really make up its mind what it wanted to be as a movie. It felt like it was kind of like creeping around the Strangers gimmick almost. Like it was a bit like, well, we don't want to play it too straight like the past movies. Like we're sort of working in elements of it. But then as it went on, it just became like them anyway. And it wasn't enough of like one or the other, but it just felt flat, really. Like there wasn't a lot of atmosphere or mood. I didn't really care about the characters, and yeah, it was just like by the numbers. It was like not a lot of logic to it, really, and it was a bit dull to sit through. It really wasn't very good. So I'm happy then I got a free ticket.
That you didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, I did it because I'm gonna review it on the channel, like, so I thought I'll use my free ticket.
Never really been into the Strangers franchise. I've watched a few of them. I think it's one of those things. I don't consider it like torture or whatever, but it's one of those type of films where you kind of figure everybody's going to die, or mostly everybody's going to die, and you're just watching that happen. And I think for me, I've always loved horror films where you felt like the person had a chance, or that you didn't know that was the way it was going to end necessarily. So you still kind of hoped. And so I've never really been into that type, but I do love Rennie Harlin because he did Nightmare on Elm Street 4.
Yeah.
And he also did one of my fave movies, The Long Kiss Goodnight.
That's
with Gina Davis. Oh my gosh, it's one of my favorite movies ever. So if he's doing 2 more, maybe this one was just the initial. So I'll give him, benefit of that. I know he just had a new baby too, so it's,
yeah,
he might have a lot on his plate. Who knows?
I think there's something about when directors return after a long time, because I think it's been at least 20 years, isn't it, since he's done a movie?
Well, he did one with Bronson not too long ago.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it came out, but he was filming one with Bronson.
Oh, okay.
I have one more, which is it's the serial killer during Nazi Germany. So
there you go. You're on the theme this month.
And basically it dealt with a doctor. It was actually happening in France. And it was interesting because you don't hear too much about what was going on. Because, when we talk about that part of history, it's kind of focused on, the U.S. response, a little bit of Russia, or a lot of Russia, given, how that helped with defeating Germany. And so it was interesting to hear about a serial killer during that time in France, that basically it was a doctor who took advantage of people trying to leave the country in France once, Hitler took over. And so he would tell them that he was going to help them get away, but, they'd have to get all their shots before they leave the country. And literally this was just his way to get them to come down to his basement so he could kill them and then experiment on them. So it was very interesting because the documentary kind of told the different political sort of intertwining that was going on and the resistance movement to Nazi Germany. But it was also showing that in the midst of all this chaos, or all this upheaval, I should say, you had this serial killer who was basically taking advantage of people's time. And I thought I clicked on it because a lot of time when I think of like old school serial killers, they always talk about like, Jack the Ripper or something like that. So I was like, I've never heard of this serial killer before. I'm not like, I like true crime. I don't even know if it sounds right to say I like true crime, but I do watch true crime. Interesting, just the geopolitical situation, but also looking at the serial killer. And like I said, it's hard to say I love like true crime because I just find certain things fascinating, right? It's like when I watch a Nazi documentary, it's not because I like Nazis, of course not, but it's because I do find how those things came about as fascinating to watch. So, I I saw that and I thought it was really interesting. It's not a very long documentary. It's about maybe going on 2 hours long because they have to set the stage of the resistance and stuff. And in the midst of this, they tell the story of the serial killer.
And what's it called again? That one?
It's called The Serial Killer During Nazi Germany.
Okay.
It's on YouTube. It's just straight up on YouTube. So
okay.
YouTube that are always kind of a little side eye I give because they're like, well, who had the best, the most fashionable, like who had the most fashionable uniforms? And like one guy is like talking about it was the Nazis. And I'm like, this is not how you should be tackling this topic. Let's not. I don't care about the fashion of uniforms. Like, what? Is this just your way of talking nice about Nazis that they had style?
Say, I won't review it here because I've done a review of it. But speaking of terrible movies, you've got Tarot, which came out earlier. Yeah. It's a Sony movie. It's a Sony horror movie. That's all you need to know. But you can go and check out my review of that anyway on the channel. So last month, Can I
just say, I like Sony, though. They actually put out some good movies sometimes.
Sometimes.
It's hit and miss. It's kind of like Blumhouse for me. They're hit and miss.
Yeah, I think part of it is they've just got their in-house style, and I think I find that a bit kind of too generic. But no, you're right. They have done some good movies, and I know they're really good for video games as well. A lot of gamers. I mean, I'm not a gamer, but I know Sony have a pretty good reputation with that. So there you go. So last month, I was watching The Omen franchise because I was getting up to date for the new movie. So the only one I hadn't watched going into May was the 2006 remake, and so I'd never seen it. Not a lot to say really. Julia Stiles, Liv Schreiber's in it. They're the two leads, and it's one of these really frustrating, plain, kind of like pointless shot for shot remakes. Really, like you think, well, just bring your own thing to it. You can always prestige the original a bit, but it just feels really flat and kind of dull. It's quite a long movie for what it is. The child actor I didn't think was very good. He was sort of more annoying than scary, and I think also Liv Schreiber's miscast in it, because I feel he's better playing like villains or at least mystery men. And so it's like, yeah, dark and brooding. He does a lot of mumbling, and I think he's much better when playing that kind of role rather than he's cast in this kind of role, but he's still playing it like that. So yeah, I didn't expect much going into that, and it was a bit of a slog. So that's Omen remake, which is on Disney Plus because Disney own everything now. So
did you see the first Omen yet?
Yeah, I've seen all of them. I was a bit let down by it. I know people have quite liked it, but I thought it started off quite strong, and I liked the way it looked. Like it definitely felt like it was in the 70s in Rome, but yeah, as it went on, it just really lost me, and I just thought it was a little bit choppy and quite messy, and I didn't really like the CGI in it. The horror scenes were a bit let down, but I think I'll rewatch it because a lot of people seem to have liked it. So.
Yeah, some people were saying it was like one of the scariest movies this year, and that's why I want to see it this week. I was gonna watch it yesterday, but I didn't get a chance to. But yeah, I want to see it because it looked like you said, the style of it, and you got that. I forget his name. There's this guy in there. He was in this really. It kind of felt like not a lot of people watched it, but he has that really deep voice.
I know.
He's like, oh, I love him. Like, I love his voice. And he was in another horror movie that came out towards the end of last year. That was like a folktale horror thing. And I really enjoyed that. And I'm sure he's been in plenty of other stuff, but this was stuff I was seeing him in. And so I really want to watch it because I know a lot of people were comparing this to Immaculate with Sydney Sweeney. And I don't really think it needs to be compared because one is connected to this huge like classic franchise and the other isn't. And even if it might have the same themes, but I'd like to kind of watch both to see the comparison.
Ralph Ingson, but he's UK.
I love his voice.
Amazing voice.
I like that voice.
he gets a lot of voiceovers in the UK on commercials.
Oh my gosh. I was like, he needs to be in like so many horror movies. Just come in and just say one thing and be like, that's what we needed. We needed that voice today.
Yeah, he's one of the better things about it because he's hamming it up and having quite a good time. But his first big role was in the UK Office. That's where.
Oh, okay. From. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he played like the bully in that, and he's just become a bit of a character actor now. Past week, me and my co-host did a review of Jurassic World Dominion, so the most recent one. And first time I've watched it. You can go and check out the review. And this isn't me bragging, but probably the review's better than the film.
That's funny.
You can check out the review. So we've done all the Jurassic movies. It's because I sort of grew up on the James Bond movies, but randomly I watched Live and Let Die during the week from 1973. So it's Roger Moore's first Bond outing. It's got the famous Wings theme tune, which is one of the greatest Bond themes ever. So good. And it's fine. I mean, and sort of going into the more campy era of Bond, very cartoony. Obviously, the racial stereotypes have aged very badly because it's the one with all the voodoo and stuff. The villain is good, though. It's the guy out of Alien who's a bit of a character actor. I really like him. And it's fine. It's perfectly watchable entertainment. There's some decent stunts. It's not the best Bond film. It's certainly not the worst neither. But it's worth it just for the theme tune. It's a great theme tune. So I randomly watched that, and I'm actually at the moment. It's a big project, but I am reviewing all of the Bond films.
Oh wow!
So I've just recorded my review of Thunderball, which should be up soon. So, yeah.
Have you rediscovered anything as you watched it? Like, oh, I thought I loved this movie, but I don't. Or I thought this movie was bad, but this is actually pretty good. Like, as you're rewatching it?
I think so. I think there's certain things that I forgot was in it. And it's like, okay. Because with From Russia with Love, which is definitely one of the best Bond films, but it's like when I rewatched that, I totally forgot. Then there's that random gypsy scene quite early on. Like there's a gypsy scene where these kind of two sisters are like competing over Bond, and it's like, yeah, we're just stopping the movie for a few minutes to do them fight. It's like, what's going on? So you forget things like that. But it'll be interesting. I mean, I like doing things like this because you're sort of looking at the different eras and how it changed a little bit. And challenges. So with Sedano, so the sort of a love triangle set around tennis. So she is an ex-tennis pro whose career was cut tragically short through injury. And she meets these two guys in the past where she's at the top of her game. And they kind of a bit of a competitive rivalry over her, and it sort of bleeds into the tennis. And we get this flash back and forth structure where it builds up to the rematch between these two tennis players, because one of them, who's the one who's married to Tasha, the name of the Sedano character in present day, he is the more successful of the two guys. I think partly because he has a bit more focus, but the whole thing with their rivalry is that he's never beaten the other guy. So it's sort of seen as like a hurdle to get over. So they build up to this match, this big match, which you get at the end of the movie. And it's this whole thing of if he wins that match, he's pretty confident he'll win the tournament because it's the US Open, which is the only like Grand Slam he hasn't won. So it really gets across the competitive rivalry, but it's partly to do with like both having feelings for the same girl. And so the movie works because they use that as a metaphor. Like they use like tennis as a metaphor for love sort of thing. Because she says that at one point. She says when you're on the court and you really get into a rhythm with the other player, it almost is like a romance sort of thing. It's almost like foreplay. And they keep returning to that throughout the movie where she says like, because at one point when she's hooking up with the other guy, it's like she's too focused on the match she's got that day, and it's like, is this about tennis? And she says it's always about tennis. And so it gets that across, and it's a good movie. Like, it's very stylish. I really loved the music because it's Trent Reznor does another fantastic score. So the synth score will be buzzing around your head for quite a while afterwards. The performances are strong. I think my only thing was I was hoping it was going to be a bit more edgy, a bit more wacky in a way. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but it was... I think the trailer made it look like it was going to be about the eccentric stuff that they got up to outside of the tennis. So I think at times they played it very straight, like maybe they played it a little too straight. So I was... Because when I saw the trailer, I was almost getting kind of 90s thriller vibes, like almost like a Basic Instinct style movie. And I mean, I'm not saying I wanted it to go that far into the sexy stuff, but I just thought maybe it could be a little bit more oddball, a little like that. So that's sort of my one complaint in a way, because I think some of the scenes nearer the end of the movie did drag a bit because of that. But no, it's very well played. It's very entertaining to watch, and it's got a nice, fun sort of theme to do with sporting rivalry and your brain off in a way and just go with it, I think.
So. I feel like the script had been out for a little bit, so I had saw like some of read parts of the script that it's on, and knowing what happens and stuff. So I thought it was interesting to see how it went from script to screen. And I think it's also interesting because, like you said about that trailer, everyone thought they were gonna get like like this threesome thing going on. And they're like, what? Where is that at? So yeah, I think definitely people they did a great job marketing it. I will say that in terms of it. And I love this director because I absolutely love Bones and All, which is one of my fave movies. I mean, a cannibal love story type thing, or a love story with cannibals. And it was done so well. And I think a lot of people sleep on Bones and All, on how great it is. I usually tell people, you gotta watch Bones and All if you haven't seen it. And so I think he's a great director. So it's great that he's doing these films,
Yeah, I think this one felt a bit more like a fun kickback sort of film.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't one that he's like, this is a really serious sort of film. It's Coda. I caught up with Coda.
Oh, okay.
So Apple TV, this won Best Picture a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about a Moot family in like a coastal town. It sort of follows them as they at one point try and start up their own fishing business, because that side of things is dying down in the town. But it follows like the teenage daughter and her kind of struggles and pressure at school, because she is the one who is always asked to like translate for them, and because she's like 14, 15, she's going through the typical teen girl stuff. So sometimes she feels embarrassed at school, but she finds a new passion, which is the choir. So she puts all her energy on that. And I think that's one of the concerns of the family. Then, like, is this right? Is she going to embarrass herself? I think it comes from a true place. I think they're just worried that if it doesn't work out, how that will affect her. But that's kind of like a sub theme to do with the girl Ruby, her name is, wanting to go to music school and wanting to push herself into a new area, and it gets into that because they're like a traditional working class family. And once again, the film is sort of about barriers in some ways, and unfortunately, the barriers which people who are different and seen at different, then maybe they can't do this stuff. So it's a typical, in a way, you can see why it won the Oscar. It's very like straightforward. It has certain tropes. I mean, it has the trope of like the eccentric music teacher, but I enjoyed that guy, so I'm not going to complain too much. But it was a heartwarming movie. It was sort of hard not to be taken in, and the emotion, and it was obviously something. Then they use a completely moot cast for the family. I like that. Obviously, the actress, the mother, I forget her name, but the one who won the Oscar in the 80s, and I know her from The West Wing as well, so she's a very good actress. She plays the mother, and it's a good movie. You go on this ride, and the girl felt very natural. Like, she felt like a natural teenager going through the sort of things that you go through at a certain stage, and I thought it was just played very straight, which I appreciated. And it got across the idea of then, you shouldn't make a big deal out of these things. It should just be like accepted. So some comedic touches as well, which I think you always need in a lot of movies. So yeah, that's Coda. It was hard not to be won over, and the musical scenes were very well done. So Coda, which is on Apple TV.
Yeah, it's a very, very powerful film. I thought it was, especially as someone with my partner, he's moderately deaf. And so that's things that he's had to deal with, with ear surgeries and, living in a world where, people, if they don't think you hear them right, they want to, think your intelligence is lower because like, oh, you can't understand or something like that. So I think it was a great film for representation, and it was like all the rave during the like award season. But we all know how Hollywood can like uplift one thing and then kind of forget about it the next year. And then it's like, oh, we did all the celebrating we needed to do. Now we don't need to actually cast many of you in anything. So it's like, hopefully, we still get to see that kind of representation. I think we are seeing a couple of movies that have that kind of representation. So I think that's upcoming movies. I mean, so I think that's really good. And I thought it was very important film for that, showing that aspect of that community.
To TV. So what's your first show?
Well, the main show I've basically been watching is Fallout, the Fallout franchise. As a big Fallout fan, I have played Fallout 76 and Fallout 4. I was really excited about this series because I thought it was, definitely going to be something that people are always quick to like not like something because especially if they're already fans of the franchise, there's always this like fear. It's like, they're not going to get it right. It's like, that's why we as Resident Evil fans can never really get a consistent show or anything because, parts of the fandom just always hate on something because it's not totally true the way I envisioned it. And I think Fallout definitely had a lot of people, except for New Vegas fans, who were they're always upset. I am a gamer, so it's like I'm in that room. I feel like it had a lot of us just being like, this is the way. Like, if you're going to do it this way. And being pleasantly surprised. And I think they've done such a great job with the plot lines, with bringing together the Fallout universe, and also introducing it to a whole new slew of people, who have not either played Fallout or who are playing it and maybe new to it. Because there's so much to explore. And Fallout also is very tongue-in-cheek. It's like dark comedy. It's tongue in cheek when it comes to commentary on society and things like that too, because it takes place in like this alternate kind of time, like if the 1950s had kind of stayed around, but then we had a nuclear war and the aftermath of that. So yeah, it just I've always felt like it's such a smart franchise and such a fun one, and I've always enjoyed the games, and I just thought that the TV show has that same spirit. So I'm also happy that it got renewed for season 2.
Yeah. And that was pretty fast. Like it had barely been out a week when they renewed it, so it was obviously doing very well. Yeah, I've been watching it as well, so I can add my thoughts. And I liked it too. Like I've never played the games, I don't know that much about the games, but I thought they cast it really well. It was great seeing Ella Farrell again because she was really good in Yellow Jackets, and I think the casting for Lucy was kind of bang on, and great character actors in there. Walter Goggins, Michael Emerson, who I love in a smaller role, but he was very good as always. Yeah, and it just had the right sort of feel, like the right feel of like at times like the Western and the Wasteland, and there was some good musical choices. And yeah, it sort of hit that sweet spot in between being very pulpy and entertaining, but it also had a bit of a backbone to it. It also had themes in there, and it was, again, quite off kilter, some good black humor, and it sort of carried me along, really. You know, I enjoyed some of the like robot scenes. I thought they were really funny and sort of like jumped off the screen at me. So it carried me along. It was ticked a lot of the boxes. Once again, I think we're talking about maybe a little bit of a niche show that won't be for everybody, but like, you know, sometimes that's to be applauded because you need to have that out there. And it's almost this idea of not everyone will love it, but the people who do love it will really love it. And I'm definitely up for more in season 2. So it's nice when the fans of the game seem to be happy as well, because
because if not, they just keep complaining.
Yeah. Yeah, another excuse to complain. But yeah, Fallout. So we both recommend that. That's on Amazon Prime now.
Baby Reindeer.
Okay.
So so I watched the first couple episodes because they're very, my partner, he ended up watching the whole thing, and I think it's because he does stand-up comedy, so he sort of had like because that's one of the things the guy does. But okay, so it is, I looked at first couple of the episodes, and it deals with this guy who essentially he dealt with a lot of traumatic experiences, and on top of all of that, he ends up kind of developing a relationship with a stalker, a woman who calls him Baby Reindeer, and there's been a whole controversy around it because this is very much based on real people. The woman that is based on in terms of the stalker actually came out and did an interview with Piers Morgan recently. And it's crazy because it's such good casting. I mean, the woman on television looks much better, but it's like they did so well. And like the actress for this, she did so well. It's almost kind of like, did he show her who his real stalker is? Like the way that she got these mannerisms right. And I know there's been controversy over, you know, when you hear about these stories, because the internet's going to internet. So that's how they pretty much tracked down some of the people that were involved in some of the stuff he was saying that happened to him and things. I think the show has some very funny moments once again, a dark comedy in that regard. So there's some humor there, but the subject matter is very intense, I think. And it deals with a character who, some people would say that it's like he has self-hate, basically, because of traumatic things, trying to kind of figure out his sexuality or coming to grips with being okay with being with his sexuality and things like that. But he makes a lot of crappy decisions throughout. And people are like, oh no, that's self-sabotage. That's what happens when people self-hate and things. But then you have another end of people who are like, screw this. Why am I watching this guy just make horrible decisions the whole time? How can you root for someone like this? So the first couple episodes I watched, I haven't finished it. I do know what happens because I am one of those people who I don't like sometimes watching a whole thing if I'm going to be completely pissed at the end of the season because I don't want to give my time. And I think it has very strong performances, particularly the woman who is playing the stalker. She's like she basically is a scene stealer pretty much. But I think it's funny because it's been such a divisive show. And even the creator was like, I did not think this was going to catch on the way it did. But I think people were really fascinated, but also kind of like, how do these things happen? But I do think it has some charm, but I do think it can be very triggering for people depending on, what gets to them. And there are definitely some traumatic triggers in the series. So even though it has strong acting and has some dark comedy, it also definitely isn't for everybody because not everyone's going to want to sit through that, which,
it's fair enough. Yeah, I was going to say I've heard mixed things. I haven't checked it out yet because I definitely heard negativity at first, but then there were people online who I follow who were just watching it on stream and they seemed to be quite into it. So I've definitely heard both sides. So it sounds like one that's worth taking a look at least.
At least the first couple episodes. I mean, each episode is only 30 minutes. So it's not super. No, it's not an hour each time.
Yeah, TV for my next one. But I've only watched 3 episodes of this show, and that probably is because I wasn't really into it. So I gave it a few episodes and then quit. And that is Dark Matter, which has started streaming in the last few weeks. And I don't know how much I can spoil, but it's Joel Edgerton, Jennifer Connelly, so 2 good leads at least. And yeah, it's about this scientist who came up with this new experiment involving a box, and it's to do with duality, basically, different dimensions. So there's a double of him, and then there's a double of people in his life, and the 2 worlds kind of intersect. Slog, it comes from a book, and the author is the showrunner, and I don't know if that's part of the problem, because I know there's other people directing it, so I don't think he actually directs any of it. But I just wonder if that's part of the problem, because it's really not very dynamic, and I'm not sure if he doesn't really know how to pace out a TV show, because pacing is very different. But I like the ideas of it. I just don't think they make the most of the ideas of it, and it's a drag to watch, and I don't really invest in the characters. And I think in this sort of thing, you have to, the actors are doing their best. I do like Joel Edgerton. I think he's good at playing this on the edge, paranoid sort of guy. I've always liked Jennifer Connelly, so the cast are probably the best thing about it, but it's always this thing with this kind of almost puzzle book sort of show. It's you've got to get the pacing right in each episode. It's almost like you've got to do that thing of revealing some things but holding things back and teasing the audience. It's a balance, and sometimes it can come off as it's just spinning its wheels a little bit, but it was just a bit bland really as a show. And it's possible it might just work as a book better because it's not really that visually engaging to watch, so it could be that deal. So I gave 3 episodes ago, so I tapped out after that. Dark Matter, Apple TV.
That's how I felt on Invasion. I tried to give Invasion a chance because that's on Apple with the alien invasion, or I guess I didn't know, because like I gave it 3 episodes and I still hardly saw any alien. I was like, I have no idea what's happening. When do we actually see the aliens that are going on? And I just kind of gave up. I gave it a try because my dude was in there. What's his name? From like Jurassic Park, Omen 3, and all of them.
Oh, Sam Neill.
Yes. And I was like, oh, my dude's in this movie. I'm going to watch this. And then in first, I was like, what is happening? I was like, nothing's happening. I have not seen any aliens. I've just seen pandemonium about possible something. So I gave up. I was like, I wanted to like this. I could not get into Invasion.
Them the Scare on Amazon. Not heard of this?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so this is season 2 of this show, because it's like an anthology show, and the idea is that each season is set in a different time period, and it involves different characters, and it's always to do with like the African American experience. So season 1, which actually came out 4 years ago now, so I think season 2 got held up because of the pandemic, but season 1 was about an African American family moving into like a suburban white neighborhood.
Oh, them.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry, I
sorry.
might have missed the title.
No,
yeah.
it's fine. Yeah, I know that one. I reviewed the first season and I hated it.
Oh, okay.
I hated that movie. I hated that series. It was like racial torture porn to me. I have heard good things about the season 2.
Season 2 it's set in the early 90s, and the backdrop is sort of the Rodney King stuff and the riots, and you kind of get split storylines, although they kind of intersect at one point. So one of the storylines follows this character of Dawn, who's like in like pretty much an all-white police precinct, and she's like the chief of police, like the lead detective. So it kind of showing the pressure of that and how she's treated differently by her co-workers, and also how she gets some heat from the local community because they see her as being a bit of a traitor. What both series does is it works in like a supernatural element. So it's almost like a metaphor, like the supernatural stuff, for like racial tension. So she's investigating a murder case, and as I said, part of the thing with her stuff is like it's the day-to-day at the police station. It's how she's being treated differently. And you've got all the race riot stuff going on in the background. And then the other side of things, which has some dark humor in it, which I quite enjoyed, but you've got this character who's like a jobbing actor. So he's trying to get his big break. And he works at like a kind of like an arcade type thing, and it sort of shows how he feels like a bit of a joke, like he's not being taken very seriously. But he strikes up a friendship with like the receptionist at like the acting agency, and she feels sorry for him, and she says, I'll keep my eye out for any meaty roles that come up. And so this is slight spoilers, but I'll just mention it because it's an example of what the show is doing. But like, she gets him an audition for a horror movie role, and this is the early 90s, so it's made a big deal of. Then typically, you know, black actors weren't given the role of the killer in these kind of things. Like normally they're just fodder, they're a supporting character, whatever you want to say. So he's really excited about that, and he really gets into it. And this is where it sort of blurs the lines between being very comedic and satirical, because there's a really cool Jason Takes Manhattan like reference, because he's watching a Stereo Hall at one point, and Jason, he comes on in character, Jason in the hockey mask, which is really cool. But he's just getting these flashes of like he could like take over roles which are normally portrayed by white people. So he's doing various stuff in his room. He, like, at one point he dresses up as Hulk Hogan. Like, that's a whole fantasy. But it really gets inside his head, like the psychology of it, and how he just takes it a little bit too far, and how he ends up being quite paranoid and quite dangerous. So a lot of it is about psychology, and I think a lot of it is about what is in people's heads and what is actually happening. So I'm 3 episodes in, and I'm liking it quite a lot. Now, I did like the first series more than you did, so I'm not sure yet whether I like this one as much, but the period stuff is very well done, and the characters are really intriguing. You've got a pretty good cast. You've got Pam Grier in there in a supporting role, always great to see. Wayne Knight, Newman himself, in a supporting role, so you've got a pretty nice little cast. So yeah, so far I'm into it. I think the mix of like satire, the social commentary of the times, and moments that work as like good horror moments as well. So yeah, them the scare. It's on Amazon now. I've also been for something a bit lighter, but last month I was watching the UK version of Ghosts, the sitcom. So yeah, which is great. I absolutely loved it. So this month I've been watching the US version, and it's actually pretty good. Like, it's one of the better like US remakes, because sometimes you go into it thinking there are some things that naturally transfer between the cultures. Like The Office is obviously an example of that. But like with this, I just thought Ghost just feels like a very British sort of show. But they do it really well in the US version. Like the way they update the ghosts, so they change it to make it more relevant to the US. So it's a Native American ghost. You've got like a jazz singer. So they change it up a little bit. There's like one from the Civil War, and it's good. It takes a bit of getting into, and especially if you've watched the US show, but they have a lot of fun with the format and the whole deal about her being able to see the ghosts, but the husband can't. So there's stuff like, there's a Dungeons and Dragons game which the ghost plays with the husband, but the wife has to translate everything. And that's fun. And when she finds out, then these things can go on for days or even months, she starts lying to him about what the ghost is like. The ghost doesn't want to play with you. So it's pretty funny, and they do lots of things with the ghost. Like they introduce what's called a car ghost at one point, and it's literally, she claims then this new employee at the hotel, then he killed her in a hit and run, but that turns out to be a lie. And basically what happened is, like, that was the nearby, like, she was just hit on the road, basically, like, randomly, and so basically she ended up in the car which then this guy bought, basically, and she stayed in the car because she likes the smell of like food when he stops by for food and stuff. It's pretty funny, and she starts up a relationship with like the Native Americans. So I also like the hippie ghost. She's very funny. I like the episode where, because the main girl is like a journalist, and she starts giving her the story about how she once did a hippie bank robbery in the 60s. So that becomes the story. So they do a lot of fun stuff with the premise. And the lead girl is in, I don't know if you ever saw iZombie.
Yes.
Is
So
it
that's
good? Or
her.
I've not seen
I
that.
thought it went on for a couple of seasons. I watched the first
Mm.
season. It was solid. I mean, it definitely had a following. It was on the CW over here. It had a
Yeah.
following, and it went on for a few seasons. So she was a good lead.
Yeah, so that's her. So yeah, no, she
Cool.
is good, and that's obviously My Zombies from the Veronica Mars creator Rob Thomas. So yeah,
Definitely has Veronica Mars vibes.
yeah, yeah.
She's a very similar character to Veronica Mars, the iZombie. He kind of has a type in terms of
Okay.
the type of female lead.
Ghosts US, which in the UK is on BBC iPlayer, but I know in the US it will probably be a different streaming service. So.
It's on CBS, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So a UK based show I've been watching and I've just started series 2 is called The Responder. So that's with Martin Freeman and he plays a cop in Liverpool, sort of on the beat, on the like they're it's called The Responder because they're the ones who take late night calls, like and they have to go out and deal with whatever it is. And in the first series, he kind of gets put with like this more inexperienced police officer, and the whole deal is he's struggling with addiction, and he kind of gets mixed up with the wrong people, and he does people favors, but he sort of like bends the rules quite a lot. And this younger police officer gets kind of sucked into that, and. It's an interesting drama because you can see how, in many ways, he cares for her and looks out for her. And because she's in like an abusive relationship in series 1 anyway. And so it's quite complex where he does have his good sides, but he's a very flawed sort of character as well. Little bit of an anti-hero because there are some good lines of dialogue. There's some good sort of darker moments of humor, but it's also it feels very authentic. Like it does capture the feel of being out on the streets late at night and the role of police officer and also mental health in the local community because it really has a variety of characters and I think it's to the show's credit, then it makes a lot of that stuff as funny as it is, but it's very well done, and I think it once again shows what a versatile actor Martin Freeman is because he plays it very well where you really believe him because a lot of times you think of him as playing nicer, charismatic guys, and this is a different sort of role. Responder. So series 2, that's BBC iPlayer as well. I think it might be on Disney Plus as well. Weirdly, that's so random. But
I know they have like a streaming service called BritBox now.
Yes,
where you can like watch a lot of.
It could be on there as well. Yeah, cool. Okay, so I have one more, which I've only seen the pilot to. And this is just a throwback show, but last night I watched the pilot to Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman with Terry.
Oh, yeah, that was my show back in the day. I watched all of that.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is one I just missed at the time, and it's one of those, if you don't see it at the time, you sort of have to catch up with it later. But I mean, I love Terry Hatcher, and I think she's perfect.
She's great.
Casting for this, and I've seen the pilot a couple of times actually because I watched it once on stream, but it's a solid sort of pilot, and I do like the twist where she is like more the lead because that is kind of in the title with her name first, and she's a great choice for Lois Lane. She's just full of energy and charisma and just very ambitious in the show, and like that comes across, and it sort of has a screwball type feel, and I'm a bit of a sucker for a good screwball comedy. Like when it works, it really works, and I think she's always been very good in those sorts of roles. And I've only watched the pilot, so I can't say too much. It does have very 90s sort of feel, like some of the pilot type tropes than you associate with a network pilot from that sort of era. And obviously the CGI isn't going to be great because it's from 1993, but the cast is pretty solid. I really like the actor who's playing Perry White. He's one of those good character actors. The parents are quite good fun from what I've seen of them. And also Lex Luthor. I really like that guy.
Yes.
Yeah. Very sort of slimy and charismatic. So yeah, I quite enjoyed the pilot, and I got the box set for Christmas. So
cool.
It's one of those. I am gonna watch more. Yeah,
they've done. I mean, I remember watching it when it came on ABC7 over here, and it was like, back when people really like sat down at 8 to watch a show because everything wasn't on streaming. You can watch it on your own time. And I really enjoyed the show because, like you said, it was lighthearted. There had the romance in it and stuff. And the thing is, Superman's been done a lot, Christopher Reeve's is probably still the best one. But I mean, and they had a recent one that just had its final season that was focused on Lois and Clark as well, but it was like Superman and Lois, it was called, or something. But that one was more drama, and they had kids, so it was like years into their into their marriage. I definitely love that one. The one on ABC7 with Terry Hatcher, because it was fun. It was fun. I mean, he's not my favorite superhero. That would be Batman, but I definitely can enjoy a well-written Lois and Clark, usually when it's focused on Lois a little bit more, because I find her the more interesting character usually than Superman.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think for the time period, just to do that switch around is quite good fun. And and sometimes, because we're used to really strong serialized TV nowadays, sometimes it's just nice to have a throwback case of the week style show like that. So I'll definitely watch more of that. Looks fun.
Have you seen Being Human before?
Yes, I've seen the first series quite a long time ago.
Okay.
The UK one.
Did you see the US version?
No.
I would recommend that one too. They actually did a good thing on spinning that, if you are willing to sit through another remake.
Okay. Well, I'll try most things, so I probably will get to it at some point. Let us know what you think of some of our picks. Also, what have you guys been watching? Let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. And I do have a Patreon if you want to support the channel a little bit extra monetarily. So it's patreon.com/boardnow. And on there you get like commentaries, movie, TV commentaries, X-Files commentaries, for an example. You also get early access to videos like this and movie reviews. And something I've started up recently is I've started up an unpopular opinion series, because we all like a good unpopular opinion. So the first one of that is actually public on YouTube, but future ones will be on Patreon, so exclusive to that. So if you just want to help the channel a little bit extra, then as I said, patreon.com/boardnow, and that's just $1 a month. So entry level tier. And I'll just flag up one other thing, because this is something I'm having fun with, but I'm doing weekly quizzes on the channel. And at the moment I'm doing a sci-fi quiz. So I've done a couple of weeks on sci-fi films, and coming this week, tomorrow night as we record this, I'm doing the first week of sci-fi TV. And that's just the fun. I make it quite interactive with clips and images, and I sort of do a whole leaderboard, and so I make it as fun as possible. But those streams seem to be going quite well. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, then it's Tuesday night, basically.
Yeah, well, season 1 of Production Tales from Hell on the Dead Meat channel finished back in, I guess, early April. We had a 5 episode season. So grateful to the 100,000 and more people who have watched that show. So we're definitely doing a season 2. I'm putting together some of the ideas of which movies to cover of film hell versus them. But if you haven't checked out the first season, which is sponsored by WeTransfer, because we love WeTransfer, through Production Tales from Hell, because on WeTransfer, what you can also do, there is a zine, a whole magazine with some awesome artists, one being one of the famous artists from the Criterion Collection, who did a zine for Production Tales from Hell, where you can download extra tidbits that myself and James from Did Meet wrote in terms of some extra history tidbits connected to each of the movies covered, along with some one-of-a-kind artwork for each of the movies with reimaginings of the movie posters. And that is completely free on WeTransfer, who did the partnership with Production Tales from Hell. So, yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, and I'll definitely post those links down in the description. So thank you very much, Chauncey, for coming on this month. And we'll, if you're happy to come back, we'll definitely have you back on and
Definitely
do something similar. So that's great. So thanks, guys. Go and follow both channels as always, and keep watching films and TV. We'll see you again soon. Goodbye.